So there are some other things that Crow does talk about when he talks about the tarot, and he has some issues with some of these concepts. And I'm not fully aware of what exactly which deck he's talking about. He always mentions the Rider Waite as if that is the bad deck, not to get that deck. But he mentions things like the Devil and Death and the Tower card. So maybe you can explain why you think he might find these so offensive.
Yeah, definitely. Before I do that exactly, though, I'm going to back up just a minute because I have to say that I agree with him. So I don't want to say that I don't agree with him, and I'm not here to say that he's wrong. I think he's right. It doesn't matter if Aleister Crowley, even if he made this Thoth deck and he was like, guys, we're going to take over the world. Everyone that uses this, they're going to be evil and they're all going to go to hell. Ready, break. Fuck yeah. And they're all excited. Because at the end of the day, Aleister Crowley was still made by God. And he was still an instrument of God, whether he knew it or not. So maybe some people needed to be steered wrong because of Aleister Crowley. Maybe they needed that test. Maybe they needed to look at the Thoth deck and have a test. Hey everybody, welcome back to another More Laws, More Problems video show. I forgot what I call this thing. And my name is Brandon Smith, if you're not familiar with me. And today we have a very special guest. It's actually her first time podcasting and being on video, and I'm very excited about that. And before we get into that, though, I'm just going to talk about what we're talking about. And it's basically, well, actually, before we get into that, I'm going to read the quote for the day, for the show. And it's from the Tao. It says, why do the ancient masters esteem the Tao? Because being one with the Tao, when you seek, you find. And when you make a mistake, you are forgiven. That is why everybody loves it. And actually, I don't think that's from the Tao. It's a quote about the Tao. But anyway, we'll let it fly because everything's perfect. But we're going to be talking about today is the tarot. And as you guys know, I am somewhat of a little tarot buff myself. I have a podcast called the Tarot Bold Podcast, TAROTBULL, where myself and my co-host Ashley break down different cards, and we have guests on. And a friend of mine, Sharon, had some questions about the tarot, and this is something that has come up recently. If you're a fan of Crow 777, he's been talking about this, and this is something I've heard him say, and it piqued my interest. So Sharon had some questions, and I'm like, well, instead of me just answering these questions on a phone, why don't we just do a video? So welcome, Sharon. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Awesome.
Good to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. I'm very excited. And just so everybody knows, Sharon got some questions ready for me, and we were going over them yesterday and trying to figure out the correct order to make this, the most perfect show we could. And they're really great questions. So I just want to thank you for taking the time and doing all that stuff and coming with me to do the show. Let me just put my phone on vibrate. There we go. Okay, cool. So anyway, if you want to get into the questions, or did you want to kind of explain what the anything about like the background or anything about that? What led you to the questions?
Yeah, we can get started with the questions.
Okay, yeah, because I think most of the questions entail what you were looking for. So go ahead.
So I know you have a couple of years of experience with the tarot, and I know you've followed Mark Cassio's work and Michael Tessarian's work. But I don't know how you kind of came to the tarot. So can you, expand upon what got you started and all that?
Yeah, for sure. Just so everybody knows that's watching this who isn't familiar with me, I got into tarot probably about around 2018, middle of 2018, beginning of 2018, around there. And previous to that, I was very skeptical. I just pretty much thought it was all garbage. I thought it was kind of something that was used to trick people and to fool people. So, and I felt the same way really about astrology too. I didn't really think there was much behind it. So, but I was going down a bunch of rabbit holes, as one does when they encounter some truth. And I was very interested in history and alternative history. And I didn't really care about what was going on so much these days because I figured, it's like, well, we're already kind of in this situation anyway. Like, but how did we get here? I really wanted to know. So as I kept going further and further back and digging these, uncovering these layers of information and truth, I kept coming across symbolism. It was everywhere. There's just symbols, symbols, symbols. So I started to study symbolism and I started to follow a couple people. And one of the people was Michael Tsarion. He does a lot of work on symbolism. And so if you're interested in this, I would definitely go check it out. There's videos that are still up. And I think it's called Sacred Symbolism. I'll put a link in this to what it is, to some of his work that you can still find, because a lot of stuff now is behind a paywall, but there's stuff out there that's still good. And basically it was a video and it was showing how all the corporations, how all their symbols are just like dark, evil, satanic, whatever it is. And it's a lot of the ones were the oil symbols, like a lot of the oil companies, you'll see a drop or like a little red thing, and it's supposed to be like a drop of blood, because apparently they believe that the oil is the blood of the earth. So, but it's stuff like that. Now, I just want to say, not all the symbolism you encounter is dark, evil, satanic symbolism. There's a lot of beautiful symbolism. And if you look at nature, there's actually symbolism in nature, so I feel it's just this other language that sits on top of the spoken language. And if people aren't aware of it, I feel it can affect you on a subconscious level. So once I found out about this, I was like, I need to know more. I need to know all that I could find out about this, because I don't want to be, being mind controlled and not know about it or whatever. This is kind of how I was approaching it. So Michael Tsarion was big into the tarot. And then I also got into Mark Passio, who works with the tarot as well. And they don't work with it like a fortune teller or anything like that. I mean, Michael Tsarion does do, I guess he does divination and he does readings for people, but they don't work with it in general like a normal fortune teller that you'd see. So they work with it more esoterically, which is using it to look internally. So you have two different concepts. You have the esoteric and the exoteric, which is EX. And the exoteric has everything to do with the outside. It's the outer shell. And the esoteric is the inner. So you can use that in different ways for metaphors. And when I talk about the tarot and I say esoteric, I'm just talking about a tool to use internally. It's kind of like a map, but we'll get into more of that. So I'm just to clarify a little bit, but that's how I got into the tarot. And once I got my own deck and started to work with it a little bit, it was very synchronistic, because I've been somebody my whole life where people either come to for advice, or they feel like they can always talk to, or they just spill their guts. Like strangers sometimes will come up to me and just spill their guts to me for some reason, So now that I have a tarot deck by my side, and just, instead of like giving somebody advice, which never really seemed to work out, or they would never really listen to me. And if you're somebody in this position, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But now it's like the cards are talking, So I have this tool that I can use, and it's made it a lot easier to communicate with people because of that, in that view. But that's basically how I came across it and started working with it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So there are these decks, like, for example, the Rider-Waite and the Thoth decks. And I've heard you mention before that these were developed around the same time, or perhaps one was based on the other. Can you maybe go into some differences between those two decks? I understand the Thoth deck was by Aleister Crowley, or Crowley, how do you pronounce that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the general deck that most people know is the Rider-Waite, and that's the one that looks like, that has all the medieval characters. So you have a lot of knights, you have peasants and stuff like that. You could see castles and everything with that theme, kind of like almost like Game of Thrones. And this deck it came around, I think it was probably around the early 1900s or so. And again, don't quote me on any of this. If you're somebody who's listening to this and you want to know like specifics of the history, I'm the type of person who I'm like an aggregate of information kind of. I take in a lot of information and I use it allegorically. It makes sense, and then I could spit it out for other people to make sense. But as far as the accuracy of like dates and stuff, it's not exactly right. But I can give you like the gist of it, and you guys will see what I mean. And if you have more, please comment below with questions. I'll love to answer your question. I'll find out if I don't know. But the rider weight is what most people would use, and the same people who are associated with the rider weight are also associated with Aleister Crowley. They ran in a lot of the same circles, and I believe Aleister Crowley was a member of the Golden Dawn. I think it's the Golden Dawn Society or something. And if you want, this is the thing, you can go up and look at all this crazy stuff that Aleister Crowley have said to done, and all the stuff he wrote and these things that he said. And I came across him. I've heard of him before. I had come across him with Michael Tessarion and Mark Passio and stuff, and they talk about him and they quote him and they use some of his work, but they always talk about how you should never fully accept anybody. You know, like there's always we'll just say a good and evil aspect of everybody, right? You're not going to hear me use those words too much, but we'll just say for the sake of argument, right? So it's a good and evil. There's always like a dark and a light. And so they were highlighting some of what he said that actually could help humanity. And they also had different opinions, but they weren't like worshiping the guy or trying to really further his work. And Michael Tessarion uses the Thoth deck, and he uses the rider weight. And the Thoth deck, like you said, is from Aleister Crowley. He designed it, and him and an artist made it. And a lot of people, again, like I said, because of his character and some of the stuff that he's done or been attributed to doing or wrote about that they done, like trying to contact evil spirits and entities and all this stuff. I'm not saying I'm down with any of that. My thing is, well, I guess we can get into that a little later. I don't want to jump the gun, but so the decks have a lot of the same concepts. And if you just back up to look at really what the tarot is basically just a representation of numerology and different concepts in the major arcana. So there's two, if you're break down the basics really quick of the tarot, there's 78 cards. You have 56 minor arcana, which are just like a normal playing deck of the 52, except there's one more card in each suit. So you get 56. And then you have 22 major arcana, or people call them trump cards. And these are 0 to 21, or sometimes 1 to 22, depending on the deck. And they are more of a representation of each number in there. And they also, some people would argue and say they represent a Hebrew alphabet, each letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and also different esoteric ideas. So each of the major arcana is just like a work of art and a masterpiece and kind of a book. You know, they say like a picture's worth 1,000 words. That's really what the major arcana are about. So you could really, you don't even really need a deck of tarot cards. You can just go by what each suit represents and what number represents in the minor arcana. And then if you want to do the major, you just go off of that. You can go off of that idea. So you can just use these ideas as well. But then when you're actually using the card, I think what happens is with the artwork, people, if they perceive the artwork as satanic or evil, then it starts to ruffle people's feathers. And with the rider weight, you don't really see any of that. It's just like a normal, you know, standard deck. And then the Thoth is kind of based on top of that, because like I said, these people they ran in a lot of the same circles. So you will see a lot of different ways that they relate. And in the Thoth deck, you get a lot of this imagery that looks like it could be either satanic or evil, or the use of the symbols sometimes looks a little negative. And I think, again, that's really where people start to get tripped up. And I get it too, because we're going to get into this further. I'm not trying to say that tarot isn't evil or it is evil. To me, it's just like a tool, just like a gun or a hammer. It could be used for good or for evil, and depending on your point of view and what you're on how you're actually viewing it. But to come back to how they're related and everything, I think that's about, I think I pretty much covered that. The major differences though is in the rider weight, you're still going to get strength in the 8 position for their major arcana, and in 11 you'll still get justice. Whereas in the Thoth deck, the artist and Aleister Crowley and they decided to switch it around. So you have strength is actually number 11, and what is justice or balance is number 8. So that has a lot to do with exoteric and esoteric principles too, which we'll get into further. But I think that about covers the relation between them, though, unless there's anything else you can think of.
Yeah. So yeah, I figured that was one of the major differences. And both Mark Cassio and Crow 777 mention this and talk about the swap between those two cards.
Yeah.
Yeah, where the 8 should be strength and the 11 should be justice, and it should always be that way. And they, like you said, some people consider that as bad or wrong, or sometimes maybe evil. Can you maybe explain why it is or not evil, or like, how do you use your decks?
Okay, yeah, I hear what you're saying. So there's also some speak of the decks being inverted and stuff, and I'll just say that really quickly. So my view of the world, the way that the world works, and whatever you want to say is like Babylon, the world, cities, whatever like that, it's just an inversion of nature. And then if you want to live, then nature, how humans are supposed to live in accordance with nature, is the way. So, and I'm not saying one way is right or one way is wrong. You can live either way. I'm not here to judge you, certainly. Other people might, but I feel like you can live both ways. That's really what the yin and the yang is about, and that's what balance is about. And so if you have to go along with the world to do whatever you do and whatever you have to get done, it doesn't mean you have to hurt people, but sometimes you have to go along with the world. You're going to feel anxiety or I know that I feel anxiety just because I'm not going with the way that nature wants me to go. So say I'm going, whatever it is I'm doing, according to the world, like in a city or whatever. And when I'm out in nature, I feel at peace because I see, just like Crow says, there is no lie in nature. You're just staring at truth. It's like when you're hanging out with a bunch of people who actually want to hear what you have to say. I think people listen to this know what I'm talking about. Like if you're talking about some truth and most people don't want to hear it, but then you get around a few people that do, and you have this amazing conversation. It's the same thing when you're in nature, because nature, it's truth everywhere. You just can't help but look at it. So, in that way, you could say that these decks are inverted because they're more aligned with the world, or you could say they're inverted because people were using them for nefarious reasons. And when you take the 8 card and the 11, what that's all about, the 8 card, the strength card, and then 11. So 11 is supposed to be the number of perfection. And the reason that justice is in the order of perfection is because most people believe that top of the food chain, like the most important thing is natural law, God's law, the golden rule, do unto others, or do not do unto others which you do not want done to yourself. This is pure justice, and it has to do with natural law or karma, or wherever you believe, or it's kind of like vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. It's like if something happens, unless you're defending yourself, it's your right. But if something happened and it's all done with, you can't go and seek vengeance. It's like it's up to the Lord. So that's what they put as most important. Now, what Aleister Crowley and his whole crew, whatever, got up to, from what I understand, and now this is the way it's explained to me. Again, I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know Aleister Crowley, but this is an esoteric idea. So it's not an exoteric and outside. This is the internal idea. And what it is, they felt that strength was needed to be the most important thing, because people need to employ the strength of will, like that force inside them, that masculine force, to actually be able to go forth in the world and do the right thing or walk the right path or whatever it is that they have to do. You need strength to to get it done in the world. Now, people look at it and say they put strength there because they need strength to control the world and all this stuff. And that could be true. I mean, maybe what they said I read was a lie and it was just a misdirection, but it doesn't matter, because I like to look at it that way. Like that's a really good way to empathize with them and be like, wow, I don't agree with it. I still think justice is the most important thing, but strength is very important, because without that strength of will, you're never going to look inside to do that real work. You're going to look out, point your finger, You're going to go, it's them, it's them, it's the evil Satanist, it's the Kabbalist, they're doing it to me. You're never going to point the finger at yourself and say, what am I doing? What behaviors am I doing that are holding me back first before I start pointing out there? And that's what takes real strength. And that's what, as it was explained to me in the way that I read it, is what they were talking about. Now, again, I'm not here to defend Aleister Crowley or any of his crazy actions. But what the reason why I bring this up is, if you are somebody who thinks it's evil and stuff, instead of looking at it as evil, if you think about it this way and just ponder on it for a minute, even if I'm wrong, I might be wrong, but I'm not lying, baby. Even if I'm wrong, it's an exercise in empathy. And then this way, the way I do it now, I don't have to hate these people. I could just let it go, and I could spend my time and my focus and my attention, which is my most important thing, on something else. So that's the idea of the 8 and the 11 as I see it. And I get both sides. You're right. If you want to take justice, because justice isn't the most important, it's strength. That sounds very utilitarianistic. That sounds very like a dictatorship, like utilitarian, like 1984 coming in, like strength over justice. I get it. It's scary. It does sound that way. And maybe that's what they were talking about. But it, again, like I said, too bad for them then, because I like this concept better. Even though I don't agree with it, it helps to remind me how important that strength is. If those guys thought it was the most important, I could still lend it a lot of credence. Even I think it was Mark Passy was saying, he's like, they have a really good point, but I don't agree with them. And I thought about it I didn't just, because Mark Passio said it, I didn't just go with it. I thought about it myself, and I'm like, yeah, justice, dude. It's got to be justice.
So that being said, do you swap when you use your Thoth deck? Do you swap the 8 and the 11, or like have you marked it off and like said my 8 is really an 11 and my 11's really an 8 or something?
So what I do is normally I'll order my decks before I do a reading or whatever, and I do put it in that order. I don't mark it or anything. I just swap it, and I know. And then also when I covered it on my podcast, I covered it in the 8 position. I covered strength in the 8 position and justice in the 11, or its balance actually. And whenever I guess do a reading, I also look at it that way. If it comes up, I keep it in that position. So yes, I do.
Okay. So what about the newer decks that you've gotten, like the Wildwood and the Druidic one, and any other decks that you know of? What's the order usually? Are there too many others that are following this Thoth swap, or are they mostly following the original order?
A lot of the cards have their own interpretation of it, but from what I'm seeing, most of them follow the Rider-Waite order, which is 8 is a strength card. Yeah. So, and I think that's why the Thoth deck is such a big deal, because from what I just got into this like 3 years ago, everybody. So, from what I understand, I'm sure there are other decks that is reversed, but it's the main one that is reversed that people know, that I've heard about. So, and there's other concepts too and we can get into that later, but this is just to tackle the 8 and 11 concept.
Cool. So there are some other things that Crow does talk about when he talks about the tarot, and he has some issues with some of these concepts. And I'm not fully aware of which deck he's talking about. He always mentions the Rider-Waite as if that is the bad deck, not to get that deck. But he mentions things like the Devil and Death and the Tower card. So maybe you can explain why you think he might find these so offensive.
Yeah, definitely. Before I do that exactly, though, I'm going to back up just a minute, because I have to say that I agree with him. So I don't want to say that I don't agree with him, and I'm not here to say that he's wrong. I think he's right. And it has to do with, I wrote a lot about this in my book at shadowworked.com. You can get it. I'm actually just going to start giving away for free, everybody. You can donate if you want, but I just want people to read it, and I'm on to the next one already. It's like, anyway, so it really has to do with how you see the world, because these concepts, if people who are unconscious of these concepts, like death and the tower card and all this stuff, are looking at these cards and Satan and stuff, it could cause a reaction inside them that's not going to be a positive one for them. It could put them in a fear state of mind. It could allow them to be controlled from external sources. So I think he's 100% right on to sound the warning bell on this. And I don't want to like say that I'm, again, I'm going to say that. So, but, and everything after the but is bullshit. I heard, I just said this to somebody, but, if you want to look at it a different way, you can look at these concepts like death and the tower and all this stuff, and it's just concepts that you'll naturally see occurring in nature itself. Now, I think his problem is the way that they again, the way that they illustrated it, because he had like the tower, it seems like it's like pre-programming maybe for 9/11 or something like that, or it has something to do with that. And then the death card, obviously it's death, like it's one of these things where he thinks where you think a lot of people are going to die. It's like a time like now of disease and stuff. So I could see how these cards and how these concepts in these cards can be used, because just so you guys know, like I said, like a tool, I used concepts of the tarot to create my book. You'll never even see it in there. You'd never know, but I knew as I was laying it out in the chapters and everything, I used those concepts of how to build something correctly, and I was able to make my own book and self-publish it that way. So you could also use these concepts to control a large group of people. And if you're using a tarot deck and you haven't done the work on yourself, again, like I was talking about earlier, which is just to really look at the shadow, the darkness inside yourself, because that's really, I think, the darkness that's what I started with, because I used to see all these external enemies in the world. And once I got to know the darkness of myself and why did I want to do things that weren't considered, like I had issues. I talk about this in my book. I had severe intimacy issues. I was just like sleeping with all these different women and stuff. And I didn't want to have a family or anything like that. I was like, what's the point, So, it's, I think I lost my train of thought. I got so excited. It happens. So these ideas, though, they could be used if you're unconscious of it, because you just keep going along with it and going along with the idea. I'm still trying to pick up the thread of where I was. What was I talking about, Sharon? That's why you're here.
Yeah, so I was asking you, why would Crow find some of these concepts offensive, like the death card, the devil card, and the tower card? And you were just explaining a little bit about the shadow work and how that's important.
Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, thank you. I remember exactly what I was talking about now. So the shadow work is important because, I was going back to Crow and because the tarot is just so, you're like, yeah. So the shadow work is important because I had to find out why I had these urges and impulses and why one woman wasn't enough for me. And, was it them? I kept thinking it was women, like it was all their fault, but no, it was something inside me. It was a low self-esteem. Could it be, and was I using these experiences to make myself feel better and validate my existence on this planet? Could it be, So once I figured that out, I was like, oh, then I just couldn't do it anymore. I'm just like, oh, that's what I'm doing. Like, ugh. So I feel like, yeah. So that whole, now me blaming women went right out the window. It's not their fault that I can't find happiness. It's my fault. So in that same spirit, I feel I do it now. If I feel there's something that's wrong with the world or evil or something exterior, I'm like, well, what is it inside me that could be projecting out there? It's a fun exercise. It's not always true, but it's a good place to start, because if you could train yourself to start there, this world would be a much better place. I'm just going to say. So anyway, if I see, since I've done the shadow work now, when I look at a deck of cards, a tarot card, when I see the death card, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of dying. I think I've overcome my fear of death, but I realize that it's just talking about a normal cycle that you'll see in nature, which is death. And it doesn't mean your physical death. It could just mean the death of the way you thought of the world. Like I previously was running around as this sex addict, I guess you could say, or whatever it is. And that part of me died. and I had a rebirth, and there was this whole experience. And now I'm even starting this garden, and I could see the garden growing and the way it goes, and you have to prune it and stuff. It's the same thing I had to do to myself. And I use the tarot now to do that. And so when I look at the cards, even if I get the death card or the tower or whatever it is, I'm looking at it as a mirror in different aspects of my life. Like, where am I at now? What am I doing? You know, these people are falling out of the tower is this tower, and you have a guy and a girl, like a king and a queen, falling out like to their death. And it looks similar to 9/11, the people falling. So, but when you're looking at that, you're like, wait a minute. So if I was in this high tower and then I had a fall, what could have caused that? So you're kind of just, that's what you're doing. So you could sit around with the tarot card deck, and you could try to contact different people. And because I feel just like synchronicities work, just like a temperature gauge works or a compass, it's the same. It's just a tool, and you put it out there. So if that's where your intentions are and you're putting your intention there, the tarot is basically just like a talisman. It's just a piece of paper, but you're focusing your attention on it. So it becomes like like Indiana Jones, when the light comes through and it focuses through, and it makes it even better, and it points to the thing. It's like that. It's taking all your attention and it's focusing on something. And that's going to happen because that's how things manifest. That's what real magic could it be is all about. It's not what you see in a Disney movie. Disney, that's their little trick that they play. They try to convince you that magic is this thing where it's external and you make these things. No, in my view, and what I've seen, and this isn't just my idea, but I'm just saying my point of view, is if you can align your thoughts and emotions to create action in the world, that's true magic. Because every day you're creating, whether you know it or not. That's what Masons are about. That's what Freemasonry is about. That G in the middle of the compass and square stands for generation, creation. You are a Mason. You are making your day. Every day you're out there building. But are you building for yourself or for somebody else? If your thoughts and emotions aren't aligned properly, then you're probably building for somebody else. And that's the same thing with the tarot. If your thoughts and emotions aren't aligned properly, you're going to have a blind spot. It's like Loki. This is the concept of the trickster. Loki's going to come in, and it's just an internal part of yourself. It's like an addict, how an addict, another piece of them just takes over, and then they just engage in this behavior, but they're still there witnessing it. The same thing. It's an evacuation of your personal responsibility. And you do that, and then you say, wow, the tarot says I should go hook up with this girl, or the tarot says I should go smoke crack, or whatever it is, But it could be, the tarot says I should invest in this because this is what it says. At the end of the day, is it the tarot telling you that, or is it an element inside yourself that you haven't worked on that's running rampant because you refuse to work on it? Because you're saying, I'm not evil. I'm not that person. And, I picked up something. This is hilarious because I picked up the thing from Jordan Peterson, which I still remember to this day. And again, I'm not saying I follow that guy or anything, but just because, just like Aleister Crowley might have had some crazy satanic, things, whatever. He still could have said some things that might have made sense. And one thing that Jordan Peterson said that made a lot of sense to me was like, listen, guys, people think to themselves, how could the Nazis have done all this horrific stuff or whatever? How could people during wartime do these horrific things? I'd never be able to do that. And that's your mistake. If you think that you're not capable of terrible things, then you may commit terrible things. And what I had to do, I was in the Marine Corps, so I know I'm capable of terrible things. I've never done terrible things. I was in the 90s. It was much different. But I was trained for that. And I know, I'm like, all right, I'm in touch with that now, though. I'm not saying I'm going to go do it. But so instead of saying I'm not capable of it, the Marine Corps actually put me in touch with that dark side of myself about, and now I'm older and wiser. So I have a little better, a way better grip on what that means. But what I'm saying is, it doesn't even have to be something as dark as that. Just say, if you have a habit, say picking your nose, right? You're like, I don't pick my nose, but then when no one's around, you're picking your nose. But if you just admit that you do it and you wonder why, you're like, well, it's just an easier way to get the boogers out. Our fingers, they are like, why not do it? And then you're just in touch with it and you're okay with it. And that doesn't mean you have to. Then at that point, maybe you can let it go or whatever. But that's really what it's about. It's understanding the mechanics of your own behavior and why you're doing it. And you can use the tarot for that. Or like I said, you can use it to conjure up Loki and have all kinds of trouble. And I'm not saying that I'm judging those people either. Again, this realm, could it be it's what this is we're here for? It's to, this is what it is really at the end of the day. It's like you could tell people thou shall not kill, thou shall not steal, but if they want to kill and steal, they're going to find a way to kill and steal. Now, if they get all the killing and stealing out of their body and they're just like, I'm sick of fucking killing and stealing, then they're really never going to kill and steal again, because they're going to be like, I'm sick of it. Now, I'm not advocating killing and stealing, and I'm not saying we should let people just run rampant and do it. But what I'm saying is, if this existence or realm, if that's what it's for, that could be part of what it's for, and not just killing and stealing. It could be whatever. It could be heroin. Like, you just got to do all the heroin and get sick of it, or whatever it is. Who am I to judge somebody else's behavior? Now, if their behavior is infringing upon me trying to get in touch with my pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, then yes, they'll be met with force, which is the positive use of force, which is self-defense. But again, I just don't want anyone thinking I'm soft over here. That's all. But anyway, does that answer your question?
Sort of. Can I add more?
Yeah, please. Yeah, please. I feel like I was getting lost in the weeds over there.
So I guess I would like to understand, comprehend what the cards were before that they changed. So like the Tower card, what was that before it was a Tower? What was Death card before it was Death? What was the Devil card before it was that? So that I guess I can comprehend why the change, or why the difference. And then maybe, explain a little bit why I don't know. I don't know how to explain it, but how did people interpret it before it was changed to it? And then how do people interpret it now? And is it okay to interpret them both ways? Like, I've heard you say everything is perfect. So, you know what I mean? So maybe go kind of into that a little bit.
Yeah, I could. Let me go into the everything is perfect and then bring me back around if I forget about the other part. But so this is kind of a concept that is pretty heavy in the Tao Te Ching. And I feel like it's heavy in all, if you believe in God. This is what I tell people. I ask them if they believe in God. And if they do, I say, okay, then you believe God created everything. Yes. And you believe God is perfect. Yes. Well, then his creation must be perfect, right? And that's basically where I draw the line. And I get everything people will say to me, because it's not like I'm stupid and I don't understand the other side. I'm just saying that everything you have to say, back it up for a second and take my point and try to do something, try to destroy that point, which I don't think it can be destroyed. But I will elaborate on it further. And what I mean is, I don't think that everything that's going on is awesome, right? There's a lot of shit that sucks. I know, right? It does. This world is a crazy place, and there's a lot of terrible things that happen. But what I'm talking about is, we live for 60, 80, 100, 120 years, allegedly, right? This thing has been going on with humanity. What's going on today didn't just happen. It's the result of everything that happened because of our parents. And that's a result because of our grandparents and their parents. And it's just been rolling downhill. And I'll put it this way. A friend of mine recently exited this realm. He killed himself, a kid I know. I haven't seen him in a while. It's not like he was a good friend, but it's somebody, I know, grew up with and stuff. Probably saw him about 2 years ago last. But anyway, so, and I was talking to him about a friend, and he has kids, or he had kids, or his kids are still around. And they said, it's like a direct download. He just took his trauma that he couldn't deal with and he just put it onto his kids. And I feel that's what, and no judgments again. Okay. I'm not judging. I'm just saying if you're looking at it, that's what happened. So I feel that's what's been going on for hundreds, thousands, millions, who freaking knows how long it's been going on. Maybe there was this initial thing that happened. Maybe it was like a cataclysm. I don't know, whatever it was. Maybe humans were existing in a golden age they talk about. Something happened, or maybe it was just people's own desires got the best of them, and we ended up, like they say, hard men, tough men create good times create weak times, or I screw that one up. Tough men create good times create weak men create bad times create tough men create good times. So I think we're just on that end of the cycle. I don't want to like just blame anybody. And, I'm glad I brought that up, because this also goes into what I've said before about people who are Satanists, quote unquote, controllers, the Illuminati, the Tavistock Institute, the Council for Relations, all these people, the Bilderbergs. Everybody thinks they're in control, right? I'm here to say they're not in control of anything. I'm here to tell you that they're tricking you into thinking that they're in control. And this is another one where I could just say to you, if everybody realized this and just turned around and did their own thing, I'm pretty sure we all agree there's nothing nobody can do, right? You can't even call the army in on that one. So just because of that simple fact means that they're not in control. Now, okay, everybody, basically the majority of people are, it seems like they're under their control. Now, I want to propose, what if the majority of the people are just under the control? This is going to really sound hard. This is going to sound crazy, might blow your mind. But what if these people that you see that we call sheep, what if they're just under the control of their own desires? And then they evacuate, like we were talking before, and they just engage, and maybe they're not heroin addicts. Maybe they're just addicted to TV, or they're just addicted to sports, or whatever it is, or this, they have a form of escapism that they focus on, while all these other people who we call the controllers run in and take advantage of them. That's more what I see is happening. So that's why I think even if you did get together and you destroyed every last Satanist, someone else is going to come along and take advantage of these people, because they are screaming for it. They're like, please take advantage of me, because I need somebody to do it, because I need my lollies and my fancies. So that's how I'm starting to see the world. And let me tell you, when you start to see it that way, you become your own Neo. You are Neo. You're like, wow, all these people, there's nobody trying to hold me back. I could start a garden and grow all this stuff, and I could start a show and write a book, and no one cares. The government's not going to kick on my door. Yeah, YouTube might kick you off if you start to talk too much shit, but that's their thing, man. It's, what are you going to do? It's their ball. It's like when you're a kid and you're playing with a bunch of kids and only one kid has the football. And of course, he's the spoiled brat. That's why he has the nice football. And then he's like, I don't want to play anymore because he sucks and no one wants him on his team. And he takes his ball and you're stuck with no ball. It's the same thing. So, but to bring it around to the tarot, I think really what the pictures and the symbolism is what it is. It's because you see death riding in, and it's, before it was more of an idea of a natural cycle. It wasn't supposed to scare you. It wasn't supposed to put you in fear. It wasn't supposed to be the devil. It was your own desire keeping you chained. If you look at the devil card in the Rider-Waite, right? It's this card where there's two figures in front and they're chained, and the chain goes to a box that the devil's sitting on. And at first thought, you're like, wow, these guys are chained up. And then if you look closely, they're loosely, like the chains are real loose. It's like those people put them there and they're just like, what are we going to do? I don't know. What am I going to do? I'm stuck. I'm an alcoholic. There's nothing I could do. What am I going to stop drinking? So, yeah, I'm a comedian, everybody. It's cool. So that's, again, more what I'm seeing. So when it comes to the tarot, now that I've done this work and I look at it, that death card doesn't scare me anymore. I get a death card and go, okay, what part of me, how did I stop looking at the world in a certain way? What aspect of me died? What behavior did I stop? What should I stop? I don't think about, oh my God, I'm going to die. And I go into a state of fear. And again, I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to say Crow and everybody, that's what they're doing. I'm not saying like but I'm just saying, this is how I see it. Maybe there's could be other points that I don't see that they're talking about that are valid. And I would love to hear them, because I'd like to talk about that too, because this is very interesting stuff to me. But I feel, though, my point that I made before the tarot kind of trumps all this, where it's like, it doesn't matter if Aleister Crowley, even if he made this Thoth deck and he was like, guys, we're going to take over the world. Everyone that uses this, they're going to be evil and they're all going to go to hell. Ready, break. Fuck yeah. And they're all excited, because at the end of the day, Aleister Crowley was still made by God. and he was still an instrument of God, whether he knew it or not. So maybe some people needed to be steered wrong because of Aleister Crowley. Maybe they needed that test. Maybe they needed to look at the Thoth deck and have a test, just like Gandalf was tested in Lord of the Rings when Frodo said, "Here, you take it, Gandalf," and Gandalf's like, "Fuck you, I ain't taking that ring. Are you kidding me? If I get that ring, you see what's gonna happen?" So that's what I mean. It's like that. It's like saying certain words. It's like you can't say retard because these people it's going to hurt their feelings, or you can't say this word because it's going to hurt their feelings. It's like, did you ask them? Don't you think by saying it's going to hurt their feelings, you're kind of patronizing them? Isn't that kind of like racist or discriminatory? Like everyone likes to be made fun of. Let them. Don't speak for them. And it's the same with this. It's like, yeah, it could be evil, but what do we burn it? Is that what we're doing now? We're burning decks and we're burning books. You know what I mean? Like then we're no better than the other side. That's what I'm saying. I just think it's a higher understanding. Again, I'm not saying we go out and hand everybody a deck of tarot, a tarot deck. If you don't feel called and you think it's evil, stay away from it. If you feel called toward it and you want to know more, tarotbowl.com, Brandon at comedylol.com. I do readings all the time now. I just started doing them for free. I'm like, you know what? I feel awkward asking people for money and all that shit. I mean, people still do them and pay me and stuff, but I've been doing free readings. If you want a reading, if you want to donate, send me some money. If you can't afford it, I'll still give you a reading. It still helps me. But it helps me because every time I do a reading, I just gain a different understanding. And I look at this more as I'm healing myself. And I'm trying to show people how to heal themselves. I don't try to get people hooked and coming back. And I'm not like, you got to sign up for the next thing because that's where the real truth is. No, I'm a comedian who is a Marine Corps veteran. And I just bullshit with people and I talk about their lives. And that's how it goes. That's what I do. This isn't a commercial for me anybody, but just so people can get my perspective, just to get a better idea of who I am. But again, I don't think everybody should use the tarot. It's not for everybody. There's, I went through a lot of trauma in my life. Nothing crazy, just when I was younger. I'd say when you say trauma, I was just basically, I was raised like in the late 70s, early 80s, and my parents were really young, and there was a lot of partying going on. And I was just, I was around a lot of craziness. So I am a much different person than a lot of other people. There's other people that are worse than me, I'm sure. I mean, it's not like I'm saying I had a lot of bad things happening. I'm just saying I was around a lot of partying. It's like, you shouldn't have a kid around all this partying. But so, so yeah, but again, if you have a different experience, you might not be called to these aspects or whatever. You might be a different person. Like the Bible might do it for you. I love the Bible too. And this is the thing. I don't just use the tarot. I love the Bible. I love a lot of different religious texts. I like to look at all of it because I think it's all God's creation, and even like I've even looked at the Satanic Bible or whatever the heck, the Anton LaVey or whatever. I've looked at that briefly. I haven't like studied or whatever, but I just wanted to get an idea of like what these weirdos are up to, And what I saw was it's nothing about any entity or worshiping any entity at all. Satanism, at the root, there are branches of it where they worship, a devil and all this stuff. But at the root of it, from what I see, it's just this ideology of solipsism, which basically is the thought that you're the center of the universe. You're the most important. And it's just like what do you call it? Narcissism. It's like a narcissistic thing. It's the same kind of thing where you have a worldview where, well, nothing matters because there's not a God or anything. So I might as well just do what I got to do and screw people over. And that manifests in several different ways. I mean, I just know people that are like that and they're a little self-centered. And then, people that are like that are at a Bilderberg meeting, you know what I mean? So it's like, but I think if you could be a quote unquote Christian or you call yourself a Christian, but you could still be a solipsist because on the way you're acting in the world, and you could be a heathen and you could be acting more like Jesus than a quote unquote Christian. So at the end of the day, it's all about your behavior and like, what are you doing in the world and what are you creating? Like I was talking about, and, it's not about pointing fingers at other evil figures and evil stuff. It's good to help people and to save people, but when you're just pointing fingers all day like that, it's like, I don't know. It's like, do that work, man. This shit's all perfect. again, like what I was saying before, I feel like the things that are happening have to happen for the other things to happen. And God has a plan. At the end of the day, the real point of, do you think this all is perfect? Is like, who am I to doubt God's plan? You know, that guy might be on the corner and he's going to kidnap a baby and shoot up heroin into its eye and it's going to be fucking horrible. But who am I to question God's plan, dude? I don't know what's going to happen as a result of that. You know, like maybe everything has to happen in order for us to move on. I don't know. I'm not, that is how, and this is how I do it too, because I could go on like this for hours, but I just relegate it as a mystery. I just say to myself, that's a mystery. I don't have the tools to perceive that right now. Maybe someday I will, but for now it's a mystery. Let me go on to something that I could actually affect in the world, which is my own behavior. It's the only thing I can affect. I can behave the correct way, and then hopefully other people around me will. And if they don't, that's on them, man, you know? And I could tell you firsthand experience, it's working more than me trying to tell people, me trying to wake them up, show them my sick proofs, trying to show them evidence, conspiracies, all this stuff. I just do me now, and it gets a much better response. People are just changing their behavior. They want to do what I do now. They're like, shit. Not everybody, but those, you know, those people are lost. But the ones that aren't, when they hit me up and they're like, especially when 2020 hit, a lot of people are like, oh my God, you were right about so much, all this stuff. And they still hit me up and send me these videos. And I'm like, guys, I just sent them pictures of my garden. They're like sending me videos of how like everyone's going to get vaccine. They're going to make kids take vaccines. I'm like, look at my tomatoes. I'm like, you know, because that's all you can do, man. Is all you can really do.
So we'll close with this. Do you have any decks sitting in front of you, like the Rider-Waite, the Thoth, and maybe the Wildwood?
Yeah.
So we can maybe see a comparison, if it's possible to see. Or maybe you can look it up on your computer.
Yeah, let me do that. Here, this
and
is.
Then
All right, so we took a quick little break so I can get some cards ready to illustrate. And what we're going to do is talk about the different death cards and the different decks and kind of see maybe a little of the progression or a little of the differences. So I'm going to share my screen right now. I'm screen sharing. Sharon. I couldn't help it. It's so terrible. Oops. Whoop. Up. Spoiler alert. Let's see. I don't want to go to that card yet. We'll go to things in the way. There we go. Okay, so this is the death card in the Rider-Waite. Now, you see how it's a skeleton and he's scary looking, and it's like he's coming here and you see this religious figure and there's a sun setting in the background between the two towers, you know. So I understand what their beef is with all the symbolism, because you could see how there's kind of like, say there was this evil cabal that was running everything and they had this idea with the towers and all that idea, they wanted to like manifest it later in the future and they would want to write about it. It is kind of like a callback here, or like a prequel to it, right? Like a nod to it. So I could see that and I understand. And so maybe that's what their beef is. And then again, like I said, with this death card, he's rolling into town. He's a skeleton. He's looking really scary. So it looks like we're all doomed. And now this is the Thoth deck, death.
why does it say trumps?
It says that for all the major arcana because they're the trump cards.
Okay.
So because they're like the major or whatever. So now here you see somebody who looks like this is kind of why I like this deck, because it's more esoteric. It's more the inner self. It's, you know, death is this figure who's connected to everything and he's like freeing souls, it looks like, that are trapped, or maybe he's enslaving them. Who knows like which way it's going, right? And there's all the symbolism with the fish and the snake. And death has the crown, so it's like, you know, death is eternal, like it's always going to happen. And then you see this eagle in the background, the top left. To me, that's kind of like the eagle is the like God, you would say, you know, like the one who the all is like creates all this, like the web comes all from him, and death is just another tool. So that's the way that I would describe this card. But again, I see how this definitely looks evil, you know. Well, and then I'll just do this. So we'll bring up, this is now the original one from like the 1700s, right? The card 13. Now this one looks a lot more natural. He's like, there's his feet are kind of in the earth, so he's planted, so he's like a natural part of nature that way instead of the web. And he has the sickle, so it's showing the cycle, really, life and death. And it's like as above, so below. There's like two different realms. You have the underworld here, and it shows the masculine and the feminine energies underneath, both energies. So it's a little more symbolic. So it makes you, as the reader, have to draw more on what this can mean. It doesn't really point you in a direction, whereas the card and the Rider-Waite and the Thoth might point you more in a direction of death and as the physical existence of death. Again, it could be like a subconscious thing where you're controlling people. All right, so that's the Marseille, and then we'll go look at the Wildwood.
Think about the Marseille real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what's interesting to me is that like it's still kind of a deathly looking thing, like it's a skeleton. So I don't see why the Rider-Waite is so scary. You know what I mean? Like I don't see what's the huge difference, because to me they're both skeletons. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you, but I think kind of again what I was saying earlier, this card, it's more about nature, because see how his legs are planted in there with the rest of what's going on. So there's bones also, but then there's plants. So it's kind of like giving you that idea of like things die, but then they grow out of what dies. And death is literally growing out of this with it. So the symbolism of it is much different. And then in the Rider-Waite, we'll come back to it, this death is like marching in. You know what I mean? He's like a very external thing, like a Darth Vader. You see what I'm saying? He's coming like dun, dun, dun. Whereas here in the Marseille, he's just like, oops, he's kind of like more of a ferryman too, because he looks like a ferryman, right? So he has that position of the ferryman, like across the river Styx, because that's really what the idea of death is. If you have a death in your point of view and the way you see the world, it shifts and you're like, oh my God, you have like a dark night of the soul. And what that is just going through the underworld. And then you go to where you have to, and I talk about this in my book also, where, what I did was I had to rebuild the person who I was and how I saw the world and my new behavior now. Like, what am I going to do? And I had to evaluate each thing carefully and put it together. And that was the underworld, right? And that death is that signaling of that coming through. Like, here we go. And it also could be the archetype that you look toward when you're doing that work. Like, that's the, like the shepherd, again, because he's a ferryman. So you look at the aspects of what he could mean in your life and what you can use to get rid of the old and come in with the new rebirth, and what you see down here. And then going to the Wildwood here. Now, this I love because, again, you're coming back to nature, right? There's no human element here. There's nothing to be scared of. This is just what happens. The stag dies and the crow feeds on him. And this is so synchronistic that it's a crow. The crow feeds on it, and it's just the cycle of life, and it's all about, like, you got to pick those bones clean, man. Like, you can't, and you notice how the crow's eating the skin from where, like, the head and the flesh, or like the brain would be, maybe, it's like, you got to get rid of all that stuff. It's all got to go. All that old way of thinking is getting picked clean, and it's just going to be the bones. And that's what you're going to go forward with, is the bones to build again. It's just the foundation. That's really what it is. It's a metaphor, a symbolic metaphor for a foundation. The skeleton or the skull is just the foundation, and you got to rebuild again, because there's certain things that don't burn away. It's that alchemical fire. When you go through it, the stuff that burns away is the stuff that's not real. The stuff that's real, true at nature, things you really need to embody to move forward, that I needed to move forward. I'll just say, I don't want to give anyone, that's what's left. That's all that's left. Your true self. And that's what death is trying to tell you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, anytime. I had a really great time. Are there any other questions before we get out of here?
I don't think so. I think that was really good.
Awesome. All right. Well, then let me do some promoting. First, I'd like to thank you very much, Sharon, for coming on, because this podcast video would not exist if it wasn't for you. So I just want to let you know that. And as far as me, if you like my work and you like what I have to say, you can go to morelawsmoreproblems.com. It's right above my head. That's my website. That's one of them. You can get to my book from there, but the website for my book is shadowworked.com. And if you like the tarot and you want to learn more, a good place to start is my tarot podcast that I do with my good friend Ashley at tarotbull.com, TAROTBULL. The best pun you ever heard, tarotbull.com. It's not terrible. It's a lot of fun.
Terrible.
It's right. It's terrible. All right, guys. Well, until next time, thank you for listening. And thank you, Sharon. Oh, yeah. Make sure you subscribe and hit thumbs up. It's probably too late for that, but whatever. And we'll talk to you next time.